Wow. That wasn't just a word of surprise slipping out in the moment, it was something deeper. A quiet certainty felt for the very first time by someone who had spent years watching the best skaters in the world. That feeling came from coach Bruno Marcotte back in June 2019, when he arrived in Japan for the National Pairs Development Project and encouraged Ryuichi Kihara to try skating with Riku Miura. The first time Kihara lifted her into the air, something shifted. In that single instant, as their bodies moved together, the atmosphere in the rink subtly changed, as if everyone present sensed something they couldn't quite explain. It wasn't about numbers, not technical scores, not the height of a jump or the speed of a lift. What Marcotte felt was something far more fundamental. There are rare moments on the ice when a skater's intent moves the air before their body even follows, and what he witnessed that day was exactly that kind of moment. From that point on, the story of Riku and Ryuichi began, but where has that journey led them today? What have they truly left behind? And why does something deep inside us stir every time we watch them perform? To understand the answer, you have to go back to the darkness that came before the glory, the part of their story no one really talked about, and the choices they made within it. Today, we trace that story from the very beginning, because if you stay until the end, you might start to see figure skating from an entirely different perspective. Who exactly are Riku and Ryuichi, and why have they continued to move hearts all over the world? The answer doesn't exist only on the ice, it lives beyond it. Behind what would later be called one of the greatest comeback victories in Olympic history at Milano Cortina 2026 lies a deeply human story. And now we're going to uncover it together. Pair skating is, in many ways, a brutal discipline. And the statistics prove it. Because most top-level pairs break apart within just a few years of forming, since without perfect timing, nothing is created. And even if the technical skills are there, without trust, you simply cannot throw another human being into the air and expect them to land safely. There is perhaps no other sport that so relentlessly exposes the difficulty of two people becoming one. In 2019, Ryuichi Kihara was already in his late 20s, having spent years chasing the top as a single skater without ever quite reaching it. And his move to pairs was, in many ways, a gamble, starting over from zero, retraining his body for a completely different discipline, and building something entirely new with a partner. That partner was Riku Miura, still just 18 at the time, a young skater whose full potential as a singles athlete was still unknown. But Marcotte had seen something in her years earlier, something he couldn't fully explain in words, something that would eventually become visible to everyone once the two stepped onto the ice together as a pair now known to the world. Their journey toward the top, however, was far from smooth. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted the world and shattered training environments, leaving them based in Canada but unable to move freely or prepare the way they had planned. Yet even in those conditions, they kept building, piece by piece, learning each other's movements, syncing not just their bodies but their emotions, engraving that rhythm into themselves through countless repetitions. By 2022, they had reached the Olympic stage for the first time, earning a silver medal in the team event. But in the individual pairs competition, the results fell short of expectations. And in a sport where outcomes define everything, the judgment was immediate. What followed was even harder, as injuries began to interrupt their progress, with Kihara's physical condition halting the momentum they had worked so hard to build. And when training is disrupted, timing breaks, performances suffer, and frustration inevitably grows. There were even reports of tension between them, moments where irritation surfaced beneath what seemed like a perfect partnership. And for those watching closely, it felt like the bond holding them together might start to fade. Honestly, during that period, it was hard not to wonder if they would ever reach the top, as setbacks piled up and doubts crept in, because sometimes what holds people back isn't visible in scores or statistics, but something deeper within. And yet, everything began to shift again as they pushed forward, step by step, proving that what they had was not just technical ability, but something far rarer, a kind of presence, a way of expressing something genuine that resonates beyond the mechanics of the sport. Marcotte had recognized it in Miura when she was just a child, not simply as talent, but as an existence that could move people, something that doesn't depend on age or results, but reaches directly into the hearts of those watching. In a sport often dominated by strategy and precision, that kind of emotional beauty is difficult to define. Yet it became the foundation of their strength, supported by Kihara's remarkable focus and quiet ability to create a sense of safety and trust, enveloping his partner with stability and respect, allowing her to perform freely. That trust between coach, between partners, and within themselves became the core of their identity as a team. By the time the 2026 Olympic season arrived, they had built a reputation through years of results, including World Championship success, and entered the competition as clear favorites with the expectations of the world resting on their shoulders. But when the short program began, something unexpected happened. A small mistake, barely noticeable in isolation, disrupted the flow of their performance. And in a sport where margins are razor thin, that single moment had a massive impact. Their score, 73.1, placed them fifth, leaving a gap of 6 points to the leaders, a significant distance in pair skating. And suddenly the narrative shifted. Commentators who had followed the sport for decades began to say the same thing. A comeback from fifth place was nearly impossible, as history had shown time and time again. In that moment, it felt as though everything they had built might collapse in an instant. Kihara couldn't even lift his head after the performance, while media around the world questioned whether their chance at gold had slipped away. And yet, the story wasn't over. On the night before the free skate, there was no dramatic speech, no grand declaration, just a quiet understanding between the two of them. A shared resolve expressed without words, a simple promise. Let's go together. When they stepped onto the ice the next day, everything had changed. The mistakes of the previous performance were gone, replaced by precision, flow, and a sense of unity that seemed almost inevitable, as if every movement, every lift, every landing had been refined to its purest form. And in that performance, they didn't just chase victory, they redefined what it meant to trust, to endure, and to rise again when everything seems lost. Every element, each twist, each spin was executed at the highest possible level, one after another, with a precision that left no room for doubt. And by the time their free skate ended, the score told the story the world had just witnessed, 158.83, a new world best performance. And in that single moment, Olympic history and Japanese figure skating history came together as one. Kihara stood there in disbelief, Miura leaning into him, and then they embraced, both of them breaking down in tears, unable to find words as emotion took over, while the announcer's voice echoed across the arena declaring Japan's gold medal, and that sound rippled through the crowd, across the country, and around the world like a wave. The entire arena rose to its feet in a standing ovation, because what they had just seen went far beyond a performance. For years, figure skating has been judged through two major lenses: technical elements and program components. Things like jumps, lifts, spins, skating skills, transitions, performance, composition, and musical interpretation. And while many pairs excel in one area, very few ever reach the highest level in both at the same time. Yet Riku and Ryuichi did exactly that, pushing both technical difficulty and artistic expression to their absolute limits, without compromising either side, something incredibly rare in this sport. The judges rewarded it with massive scores, marking a personal best that reflected not just execution but impact. And even seasoned experts around the world struggled to fully put into words what made it so powerful, because it wasn't just technique, it was something with soul. All around the arena, you could see it in the audience. People from different countries, different backgrounds, all moved to tears, their eyes red, their expressions overwhelmed, because in that moment, figure skating proved it could go beyond sport and touch something deeply human. Even looking at the numbers, there was something almost strange about it. How could something so calculated, so precise, feel so intensely emotional? And yet, that balance is exactly what they achieved. Because even after mistakes, even under pressure, Miura never lost focus, never let a single error define the next movement, continuing forward with complete commitment. And that mindset, that way of living in the moment, became part of what made their performance unforgettable. But if you only talk about the gold medal, you're only telling half of their story. Because what they accomplished on that ice was built on something much deeper, a philosophy that shaped everything they did. To understand it, you have to look at how figure skating is viewed in Japan, where movement is not just physical but carries an inner meaning, much like in traditional disciplines such as martial arts or classical performance, where the state of the mind shapes the form of the body, and the body in turn expresses the mind. In simple terms, technique influences the heart guides the body, and the body reflects the heart again. And what Riku and Ryuichi showed on the ice felt like one of the purest modern expressions of that idea. The score of 158.83 was just a number assigned by a judging system, an external measure of what they did, but what they were truly aiming for was never just points. It was the ability to communicate something as one, to share something real between them and with the audience. Kihara once said in an interview that their greatest strength was the bond they shared, And while that might sound simple, the meaning of that word runs deep, because a bond is not just connection, it's something strong enough to hold people together, even restrict them, yet at the same time support them. A contradiction that perfectly reflects the nature of pair skating itself. Their journey followed a path of discipline and growth, guided by their coach, building fundamentals step by step, absorbing knowledge, refining their craft, and gradually reaching the highest level in the world. But what set them apart was how they approached the relationship between technique and connection, not treating elements as isolated skills performed for points, but as expressions of trust, where every lift, every throw, every movement carried meaning beyond its execution. Even their name, often spoken as one, symbolized that unity, not just two athletes competing side by side, but a single story unfolding together. And the world noticed. In the United States, major broadcasters described their performance as something beyond technical excellence, emphasizing the emotional depth behind it. While in Canada, media outlets called it a historic moment for Japan, and for pair skating itself, recognizing it as a performance that redefined expectations. In China, their routine spread rapidly across social platforms, gaining millions of views, with viewers commenting that it wasn't just skill, they could feel something deeper, something that reached them even through a screen. And seeing fans from rival nations speak first about emotion rather than competition revealed something fundamental about what sport can be at its best. Korean media also highlighted their achievement, calling it one of the greatest comebacks in Olympic history, focusing on the mental strength they showed after the short program mistake and the visible trust between them during the performance, while voices from traditionally dominant skating nations acknowledged the completeness of their routine, from technical precision to musical expression, recognizing it as a new standard in the sport. Across the world, this performance didn't just win a gold medal, it created a shared moment of understanding, where people from different cultures, languages, and backgrounds all felt the same thing at the same time. And in doing so, Riku and Ryuichi proved that what they had built together was bigger than results, bigger than rankings, and even bigger than the sport itself. Voices from all over the world began to echo the same feeling, from France to Germany to Italy, where people said they had witnessed something that would be remembered in history, something far beyond a competition. And in Milan, those who were there in person knew they had seen a moment that would last forever, while on social media, both everyday fans and seasoned experts tried to put into words what they had just experienced, with users in the United States saying it felt less like a sport and more like watching something deeply human unfold in motion, as if emotion itself had taken physical form. What made it even more powerful was how it crossed cultural boundaries, how people from completely different backgrounds all arrived at the same conclusion that what they had seen wasn't just about skating, it was a message. One of the most beautiful expressions Japan had ever shared with the world through sport. And in that sense, what Riku and Ryuichi left behind wasn't just a gold medal. Because for years, pair skating had been judged by questions like how difficult the elements were, how clean the execution was, how many mistakes were made, and how high the scores could go. But what they showed was something different, something that couldn't be fully measured by any system. Yes, their performance was technically extraordinary, nearly flawless, but more importantly, it was unified, it was alive, it was two people completely in sync, not just physically but emotionally, creating something that felt whole. And even when you tried to break it down analytically, something essential slipped through. Because what mattered most wasn't just what they did, it was what it meant. Their skating challenged the very idea of how performances are judged, because beyond the scoring system, beyond the structure of the sport, there was a deeper layer of experience, something closer to what philosophers might call a pure, direct feeling before analysis even begins, where the heart responds before the mind has time to categorize it. In that way, what they achieved wasn't just a victory in figure skating. It was a form of cultural expression, a moment where sport became a language, and through that language, Japan communicated something to the world, not just technical excellence, but values like respect, connection, humility, and the idea that the process matters just as much as the result. That true expression comes from within. And then, not long after reaching the very top, came the announcement. In April 2026, Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara revealed that they would step away from competition at the end of the season. And just days later, when they appeared in front of the public, their expressions said more than words ever could, as Miura spoke briefly before a moment of silence followed. A silence that carried the weight of everything they had been through together. There were questions, of course, about what would come next, whether they would continue performing professionally, whether they would remain connected to the sport in a different way, but whatever path they chose, one thing was already clear: their impact had gone far beyond competition. Across Japan, the reaction wasn't just about their results. It was about what they represented, the emotion they brought to people, the way their journey resonated on a human level. And in that sense, their retirement wasn't an ending but a transition. Much like many great figures before them who left the competitive stage only to begin something new. What they achieved in Milan was never just a final destination, it was part of a larger story, one that continues to evolve. Because in the end, what they truly showed the world wasn't perfection, but something even more powerful. The ability to move forward despite imperfection, to face mistakes without letting them define you, to transform setbacks into the foundation for something greater, proving that failure isn't the opposite of success, but part of the path toward it. That gold medal wasn't just the result of one perfect night, it was the culmination of years of struggle, doubt, growth, and resilience, all coming together at the exact right moment. So what is it that really stays with us, the shine of the medal, or the invisible connection between two people who trusted each other completely? If you watched them and felt something shift inside you, then maybe the answer isn't so simple. Maybe it's not just about technique or results, but about something deeper, something human, something that makes us question what truly matters. And maybe that's the real reason we watch sports, not just for outcomes, but for the stories that stay with us long after the final score is announced. As long as we keep asking those questions, their story doesn't end. Even after leaving the ice, what Riku and Ryuichi created that night in Milan lives on, carried forward in memory, in inspiration, and in the way it continues to move people across the world. What they taught us wasn't just the beauty of winning, but the strength of believing in your partner, in yourself, and in the story you're building together, and that belief, more than anything else, is what ultimately reached the world. And in the end, we return to that first reaction, that quiet, powerful realization, wow, that wasn't the conclusion, it was the beginning. And the meaning of those words will continue to grow long after the performance is over.